My name is Kenny. I'm an alcoholic. I had something more formal written down for Eric, but he went with the ad-lib version instead, I suppose. And so instead of gotten what I had written down for him, I got Kenny seems like a really, really nice guy. So thank you for that. I want to thank the committee. I want to thank all of the people that have I've come here and I've seen a lot of old friends and met several new friends and got to know some people that I knew a little bit quite well, and it's just been a fantastic weekend. And I just want to say, my God, you guys are beautiful, and I mean that. This is a fantastic, fantastic conference, and I love the FOTS format. When I was pretty newly sober, I've been sober since June the 8th of 1989. I've been continuously sober from that date, and I owe that to people like you and Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was really sponsored by experts in giving in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was able in early sobriety to fall into the loving arms of a group of men that hand carried me through this book, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. In I think 1991 or 1992, I ended up in Colorado, in Denver, at the very first ever FOTS conference, and we had some stuff going in Seattle, but it was what a validating experience that was for me to get to that conference. And I had this huge family that was just kind of inserted in my life, and I knew I was on the right path because it was a very small group of us that were really doing what we were doing. In the big book at that time, Bob mentioned last night that when he got sober in the 1970s, I think 79 or whatever it was, that you got sober, that there wasn't a lot of this going around. And I've heard that from people that got sober, well before that as well. And Tom he says, geez, if there was anybody taking anybody through the book when I got sober, and I think he got sober in the late 50s, I think maybe 58 or 59. He said if there was anybody taking anybody through the book back then, they were sure hiding it pretty well. So, we really are part of this return back to the big book. This conference is a part of that. It's part and parcel, and it's been my AA family for since I got sober in '89. I was able to come to the conference here with my wife. That was fantastic. Shannon has what I call this. Her calendar is one of selective availability, and what I mean by that is that when I go out to speak, there's different times. It's just kind of funny that way. Sometimes she can make it, and sometimes she can't, because she'll be like, well, we got the dogs, we've got the kids, I've got other things, I got sponsees, there's things I'm doing. She's quite busy in her life. And other times she's like, well, I think I can make that work. And it seems to have this connection to, when I went over to Honolulu, Hawaii, and I was doing I was doing a men's retreat there, and she thought, well, geez, that'd be great, because while you're doing the men's retreat, I'm sure I can just find something to do, So when I went to do the OMAC winter roundup and camp out, she's, I think maybe the dogs, probably better this time I stay home. So you're in very good presence. That when I said the Sedona folks had called, she's like, well, I think I can probably shuffle a few things around and make that conference. So it's really great. I'm hopefully we're going to have some fun here this morning. But before I do that, I really want to talk about, I bring my big book up to the podium with me when I speak, and it's not because I'm going to open the book and start reading out of the book. I promise you I won't do that unless things go way off course. But the reason I bring that is it reminds me of what it is that I should be speaking about when I'm speaking in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. So I said I want to have some fun here this morning, and we'll take a few little jaunts here and have some fun. But before I do, I just want to be totally clear that the reason I'm here is because I've had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous as outlined. the only requirement for membership in Alcoholics Anonymous is a desire to stop drinking. And I think that kind of came out of this piece in the big book, in the preface or the forward to the first edition, where it said, this honest desire to stop drinking. And they even took the word honest out of it. And still, as near as I can tell, there's not too many people checking on this, that you're really a member when you say you are. That's the where things really fall in my experience. But there's a huge difference between membership in Alcoholics Anonymous and recovery from alcoholism. If you want recovery from alcoholism, there's some things that you're going to need to do. And that's one of the things I love about the workshops and the things that we do at these FOTS conferences, is if you come to a FOTS conference, I think you leave with a better understanding of what the recovery process is in the book than you did when you got here. We have... We're just so blessed, with this rich literature, not just in this book, but in the 12 and 12 as well. And I see these two books now. There was a time in my sobriety where I was like just so solidly into the big book, and the 12 and 12 was I was just as prejudiced about that because I'd never really read it or done much experience with it. But it didn't, thank you. It didn't keep me from having an opinion on the issue, of course. So, but now I've really come full circle, and I see these two books, how they just intertwine so perfectly, how they just line up, and I've never found anything in either one of those two books that contradicts a single thing that is said in one of the others. And it's just what a miracle, what a rich body of work that we have. So, in Alcoholics Anonymous, one of the things I wanted to one of the things that's really occurred to me is just this piece that I call like the crown jewel of AA, and I really believe this, that when I really look at everything, this crown jewel of AA is this God as you understand God. This idea that when somebody comes to me and I'm working one-on-one with a sponsee, that my belief is not going to help you. You can't stay sober on my spiritual experience. You're going to have one of these experiences on your own. And in that process, I'm anonymous in this process of just watching and being a witness and sharing my experience to somebody having a spiritual experience. And I know it doesn't have anything to do with me because I don't tell them much about what I believe or where the kinds of things that I am currently working on. If somebody asks me, I'll tell them that this is what I'm currently reading, or this is a person that's had a lot. But we're sticking with what the message is in the big book. I also believe really, really strongly, more and more, the longer that I'm sober, that there's different terms for different people that come into Alcoholics Anonymous. And what I mean by that is that there seems to be a group of people that comes to Alcoholics Anonymous, and they go to lots of meetings, and they go to AA events, and the unity side of those three legacies is very strong in their lives. But they don't really do recovery. They don't really do steps. They're not into service work. They're just, kind of on the periphery coming to AA. And as frustrating as it seems at times to me, these people are, as frustrating as it is to me at times, these people seem relatively happy. And so that's like one end of the spectrum. And I don't have any issue with that at all. I'm not there yet. I mean, I'm a long ways from there, but I've made a promise to several people in my life that this is where I'm going, and I will get there, is that I want to be able to sit in an AA meeting and be calm and have peace of mind no matter what anybody says or does. That's where I'm going, and I know I can get there because I've talked to people that have found that peace of mind in their lives, and so I don't worry about this so much. And on the other end of the spectrum is the guy or the woman that we've all worked with, this heartbreaking case that comes to us totally hopeless. And they have this in-depth first step experience. They come to believe. They do their third step prayer. They write the inventory. We do their fifth step. They withhold nothing. They go into 6 and 7 humble. They make their list. They start making amends. They stop making amends for a week, and they're drunk. And I work with a lot of guys like that. And when, what a huge gift it is in your life when you get taken through the work and you find out for you what the truth is for Kenny. The solution couldn't be in the meetings for me. The solution I couldn't be coming to the meetings and be in the solution. I had to go through this process, and the solution had to be in Kenny, or I was going to drink again. And what a gift that was when I was going through this and I saw that I was this hopeless type alcoholic, that all other methods had failed, and that I had to have one of these spiritual experiences. I became a little more open-minded along the way as we went. So with that, I just wanted to make sure that I wanted to lift the veil a little bit. But I started drinking at a pretty young age. I started drinking when I was about, honestly, I don't really remember my first drink, but I started, this intention of just drinking as much as I could, as fast as I could, and getting totally hammered when I was about 11 or 12 years old. And I remember the occasion, I grew up in an alcoholic home. There was always a huge bottle of Gallo wine sitting on the table at my parents' house, and that was just a staple, just this big. And when that was gone, there was another one in the cupboard, and I grew up in this house. It was just the party house. When the bar closed at 2 a.m., the party came to our house. And we actually moved to another new place so that my parents could be closer to their favorite bar, so they could walk to and from the bar. And that was good. I got one applause for that, so that was nice. Yeah. And none of this is what made me an alcoholic. I'll get that out of the way, because my brother Jeff, who's just has always been one of my mentors. He's my older brother, and he's fantastic. And we grew up in the same bedroom. We shared a bedroom together, and he's not an alcoholic. And we moved into this place, and there was this guy next door, this hippie that lived next door, and he'd let his grass grow about 3 feet tall, and he would have us come over, and we would do this once a year lawn mowing for this guy, and and I swear eventually that he got a goat, and so that was like he outsourced But he lived next door. We would mow his lawn. We'd rake this whole thing up, and then he'd give us money. And I thought, well, geez, he seemed like a pretty nice guy, and we needed some booze. And so I thought, well, I'll ask this guy. And I said, well, rather than give us the money, would you just buy us some liquor? And he said, yeah, no problem at all. I mean, he was, it was early 1970s. He was a really cool hippie, and as such, he had no problem buying booze for 12-year-olds. And so... he said, well, what kind of booze do you guys want? And we thought, I did the talking. My older brother was there, but I did the talking. And I said, well, we'd like wine, because that's what I'd seen on my parents' table. We'd like wine. He said, well, yeah, but what kind of wine do you want? And I was just thinking, okay, maybe this guy's a little dull. But I said, we're not really care about the type, we're worried about the volume, we want as much wine as you can get with the amount of money that you got. And he said, okay, well, that's fine. So he left, and he came back, and he had 2 grocery bags, and in those grocery bags was 5/5, the big bottles, where I come from, 5/5 of MD 2020. So, he was like, hey man, have fun, kids, take it easy, peace. All right. So we went off, and I tell that story as much for that reaction right there as anything else. So I don't need to tell you much more about that story, other than I can tell you that some drastic things happened, and I got into a lot of trouble. I was a real introvert going into this experience. I came, like I said, I came from this alcoholic home. I had all kinds of things going wrong. My thinking was way off track from a really young age, and we were starting to get in trouble with the police, and then I was, I didn't know much about personal hygiene, and no one was really teaching me about personal hygiene. I was just entered junior high school. I was still wetting the bed, so I stunk of urine. I wouldn't take a shower. I'd just get up and kind of towel dry myself off the best I could. I would dig through the pile of old, dirty clothes and find the cleanest of the dirty clothes and put those on, and off I'd go to a brand new school, stinking, and long hair was popular, so I had this long, really greasy hair. I was just thin as a rail, and then I had this other little trip that I would go on once in a while where I would choke myself until I was just about ready to pass out, and I would let go, and I would get these few moments of euphoria. It was like my first drug of choice. Was lack of oxygen to the brain. So I stunk, and then I had just kind of a goofy look, and I would choke myself and stagger around, and my popularity began to wane a little bit in school, but that's where I was coming from. But with that booze in me, it was a whole different deal, and I never looked back. I was off to the races. I was in foster homes and group homes. I was institutionalized for I was in a special unit for juvenile drug offenders. I was the only guy still I've ever met in Alcoholics Anonymous that was on prescription antabuse as a teenager, court-mandated prescription antabuse as a teenager. Every day I would have to get up from my foster home where I lived and go about 2 blocks to the pharmacy, and the pharmacist there would administer the antabuse. And then, of course, I was like, yeah, but thank God this stuff doesn't work for, XX and X. But, and then, of course, I just stopped going. That was a very short-lived deal. But, I was just off to the races, and I got out of the last institution that I was in and kind of floundered around Seattle for a while, and I got a job. My grandfather said, hey, he was working for a family in the fishing business, and he said, why don't you come down to the boat, and you can just kind of, do some hourly work. They were getting the boat ready for shipyard and getting ready to go. And I went down and worked for these guys, and I just fell in love with it. It's like one of those things that just, I look back on it, how it saved my life. I was working up in Alaska. I was working on these boats. I was working around guys who, for the first time in my life, I was working around men who were my mentors, and they showed me how to work. These guys took me under their wings. They were unbelievably kind people. But this was, it was the wild, wild west up in Alaska in those days on the boats. I mean, there was most of the places we went, there was no police department. There was no enforcement of any kind. It was all just kind of, a pecking order and male-dominated, kind of a structure, but no real enforcement. And all of us, we were just totally off the hook. We didn't just work hard and play hard. We played hard while we were working. But even among that crowd, there was something among the guys that I was working with that disturbed them. There was an urgency to the way that I drank, because I always would know what it felt like to drink a bottle of wine down as fast as I could, and just that sensation, of that warm hitting my belly, and the euphoria that was almost immediately would follow, and so I was completely, and there was something that bothered them. My drinking scared these guys, and they started fearing for my life, my drinking and my drug use, and they started, and these really beautiful guys, and some of them I still know today. Some of them have become very close friends today, and they all kind of straightened themselves out, or at least a majority of them kind of straightened themselves out, and a lot of them were really successful. But these guys took me under their wing, and they put me through treatment twice. These guys that I was drinking with and doing drugs with put me in treatment, and paid for it. And on the second time, when I was one day out of the treatment center, and I showed up trying to get money from them, kind of in advance on my next trip, and I was totally out of it. They just said, Kenny, you got to go and don't come back until you figured things out. And so away slipped this way of life that I actually really loved, and these guys that I really cared about. And the last 3 years of my drinking, I was like the Bill Wilson. I didn't draw a sober breath during that time. I lost everything that I'd ever gained due to the things that I'd bought. I sold everything in really quick order. I wasn't homeless until the very end because I still had some game left. I could find a hotel room, or there was always some deal to be had, that's just the way I was living, and I ended up behind a McDonald's in Seattle. There was a McDonald's on 85th and Greenwood. I know there's a couple people that said they were from Seattle. I said, "Oh, you recognize some parts," but there was a McDonald's on 85th and Greenwood in Seattle, which is, it's not a terrible neighborhood, but it's not a good neighborhood either. It's a lot better now than it used to be, and it's still not very good. But next door to that was a building that housed Hagar's Tavern, and Hagar's Tavern was what we call the Viking Bar, which means that's where all the Norwegian fishermen drank, was in that tavern, and they had pictures of the boats up and stuff. But in between that space was on the front side of it was like a facade, and if you went around back, there was a space of about 6 feet wide where you could get in between those two buildings, and I drug a piece of cardboard back in there, and I can't say I was living there because I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating, I was just existing. I could hear the drive-through of the McDonald's restaurants, and people would come through the McDonald's restaurants and say, "I'll have a number 3 supersized with a Diet Coke." And I thought I heard, "Hey, somebody call the FBI, there's a freak out here shooting Coke." And it was just just a little nerve-wracking way to live, because it was every few seconds, somebody different voices. And I was literally, I kid you not, I was months sober before it occurred to me that the FBI doesn't spend a lot of time flushing, homeless people out from behind McDonald's restaurants. That they actually delegate that down to a few lower levels. But I was convinced, that this was what was going on, and I just was living in this panic. And I just this miracle of AA happened where I got sober on a day I didn't want to get sober. I got sober on a day I didn't think I was going to get sober. And I thought, even if I did want to get sober, and I did try, it's going to be another one of these one more attempts and one more failures. There was not a single person in my life, my brother, my sister, my mom, none of the guys I'd ever worked for. There was no women in my life. There was nobody left that I could call for help or to do anything. But out in the back of that McDonald's, sharing in that same parking lot, was a fellowship hall, a AA fellowship hall. It was the Greenwood Fremont Fellowship, and they call this, now it's still in Seattle, it's a different location, but in Seattle they call it the emergency room of AA, and about half the people at any one day, maybe I'll give them a little credit, maybe I'll say 25% of the people on any one day are not sober even 1 minute that are in that meeting. There are a lot of homeless people, a lot of prostitutes and drug addicts that come to the meeting and sit and get coffee, and so I went to the meeting, and I really don't have no idea where I got the energy to go, other than I was out of money, which I was still convinced, like we'd heard this weekend, I didn't have an alcohol problem and I didn't have a drug problem. I had a money problem. I didn't have enough money to buy them enough booze and drugs to take care of me for that day. And I just lived in that obsession, that merciless obsession that I was just, all of the good things in my life were gone. Everything. The camaraderie with friends that they talk about, and I had that in my life where I just had this group of guys that I was drinking with. We would just love each other, and oh my God, it's just great to, I got your back, you got mine, that love, and just all of the great things, they were all gone. Everything worthwhile in life was gone and had been for some time. And, we're so fortunate, like I said in the literature, I just look at, Bill Wilson's writing, and one of the best pieces of advice that I got sober was, I got this guy told me, and this was after I'd been through the book a few times. I'm sponsoring guys, and he said, "I want you to go back and I want you to reread the big book, but this time I want you to read it like it's poetry." And I got to see, these really beautiful things that Bill wrote. the great fact is just this and nothing less, that we've had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our entire attitude and outlook upon life. The hideous four horsemen, fear, despair. And when I looked at that and I saw what he wrote about those final days of his drinking, terror, fear, bewilderment, frustration, all of those things, even the words that he had for this pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization still didn't quite scratch the surface. And in the very end, this guy who so eloquently wrote our book and who was a master, I think, and I really believe that, that the big book is a masterpiece, especially we agnostics. It's a spiritual masterpiece. And when I say that, I put that in context. I do a lot of reading, and one of the authors that I love is Emmett Fox. And if you were to look at Emmett Fox, he was a prolific writer. He wrote significant amounts of literature every Wednesday and every Sunday for years, and all of them are good. I've never read one. There's a lot that I don't agree with, some that I love more than others, but it was all just really great literature. But if you want to read his masterpiece, you read Sermon on the Mount. Marianne Williamson writes a new book every year, and if you want to read her masterpiece, you got to go read Return to Love. There's these pieces that people just, there's this moment in time. If you want to look at Rembrandt and you want to look at his life's paintings, you want to go to St. Petersburg, so I've heard, Russia, to the Hermitage, and you want to see the Return of the Prodigal Son. That's, his masterpiece. If you want to see Michelangelo, you go see the statue of David. It's perfect. It's just a masterpiece, and that's the way these things are. And this is our masterpiece, this book. And so this person that penned this great masterpiece in those last days of his drinking fell to a place where he said, "No words can tell." Couldn't come up with the words. That bitter morass of self-pity. And so, that's where I was when I got to AA. I went to this meeting. I thought there was a guy that I knew that was going there. And I thought if he saw me, he and his girlfriend would take pity on me and they would take me to their house. And I would be sick at their house for 5 days or a week. And they would nurse me back to health. And they'd done that several times. And I went to the meeting and my friend didn't show up. And I listened and I sat. And I waited till the end of the meeting. And at the end of the meeting, something happened to me that I wasn't expecting. And I just started crying. Just big tears started coming down my face in that meeting. And I think about that. It was just like so empty inside. It wasn't, I could have been laughing or crying. The difference in how I felt inside was no different. It was just, if I would have laughed, it would have been a hollow, empty laugh. And when I was crying, it was a hollow, empty cry. There was nobody home. It was the lights were out. And a guy came up to me after the meeting. He was chairing the meeting. His name is Al. He became my first sponsor. And he came up to me at that meeting. And this is why I say, I learned about giving from experts. Al came up to me in that meeting and said, "Hey, my friends and I have been talking. And if you'd be willing, we'll give you a ride to detox. As a matter of fact, we've already called, and they've got a bed waiting for you." And of course, I was, how in the hell does this guy know I need to go to detox? And I had no shoes on. My shoes were in a bag that I was carrying because my feet had abscessed and they were swollen up and it hurt to try to put my shoes on anymore. And I was filthy dirty. I hadn't bathed in days. I was wearing a short sleeve shirt. I had track marks, all over my body. So he said, well, you want to go or don't go? And I was thinking, I still got a bag of kind of some clothes and some different stuff out by the McDonald's. So I said, well, I need some time to get my affairs in order. And so I took the 10 minutes or so to go out behind the McDonald's and, throw stuff in the bag and got my affairs in order, and off we went. In 5 days, I was in that detox for 5 days. And I came out of detox. Al was waiting for me. He owned a little car lot down on Highway 99, which was right in the thick. This is right in the thick of all of these really seedy motels where I'd been staying for the last few years. And I got sober there, and it was, he had a little apartment in the back of the car lot. I was still there at that car lot when I was a year sober. I turned a year sober. I was still at the car lot, and shortly after that, I got my own place. It was just every day for 6 months, Al would come and knock on my window, and he would buy me a breakfast. He'd say, come on. I'd get up. He'd take me up to Jack in the Box. He'd buy me a breakfast jack and a cup of coffee and talk to me about Alcoholics Anonymous. He was the first man that I ever prayed with in my entire life. I was 28 years old. So, after about 6 months of being in sobriety, after about a month actually, I started running into these guys that were doing this workshop, and I started going down there on Tuesdays. I was going through the book, going through the steps. My sponsor and I, he was, this is one of the great things about sponsorship, I think, in a lot of cases, is that, Al was 13 years sober when he found me. He'll be 40 years sober this year. I'm 26 years sober. I was 0 minutes sobriety. And when I look back on it, and I see the changes that happened in Al's life between 13 and 40, it's just as dramatic as the change that I went to from 0 to 26. It's been remarkable. So he wasn't able at that time to assist me much in the big book workshop work and the big book stuff. But today, he's really, just he's very devoted to the steps, and he works with new guys, and he's still doing the same thing, just going to these meetings and looking for the face of hopelessness and reaching his hand out to the still suffering alcoholic. So, when I was about 6 months sober, Al came to me, and his mother had passed, a few months before, but he needed to go over to her home in Idaho, and he was going to kind of clean out her house and gather some stuff, and I think his other siblings had already been. So there was just a few things left he was going to go over and get that they'd left for him and clean the place up, and I just thought, I'd been with him every day, and he'd always breakfast, and then I'd work for about 2 or 3 hours. He was paying me $5 or $6 an hour, but he never let me. He was smart, he was intuitive, and he would never let me get to a place where he owed me more than $20, because he knew that the wrong side of a $20 bill, and this guy is completely gone, So, but I was like, God, what am I going to do? Al's leaving, and Al is what's keeping me sober, and that's why I'm having this deal. And I really wanted it. I got to a place where I'd been, like, I just walked down the street and I'd just get that little shiver, just, whew, oh, man, it's good to be alive, and I'd be like, God, where did that come from? I hadn't felt like that for as long as I could remember. And as I was going through the steps, this stuff would come to me that like that first time I went to the FOTS convention in Colorado, the very first ever FOTS in Colorado, and had that real validating experience, and I just knew, I was like, maybe my life hasn't been just a big mistake. But Al was going to go. He was going to be gone for a few days, and I just thought, that's it. The gig's up for me, I'm done. And thank God, we have this 10th step, this we've entered the world of the Spirit, and now it's time to grow in our understanding and effectiveness. And if you look at the 10 and 11 in our book, and just look at the number of times they use the types of words like intuition, the intuitive thought, the inspiration, the spirit within, that we're to be inspired, that the word decision, as in not being able to make a decision, it was always the indecision that drove me nuts. I couldn't make a decision, but this ability to just get quiet and just make a decision and move on. And Al was one of those guys, and so I was sitting there at the car lot. I knew that I was going to be on my own, and I knew that the gig was up. And I see Al pulling up outside, and I'm thinking, what's he doing here at the car lot? He's not supposed to be here today. And it was this inspiration, he came, parked, came upstairs and said, hey, Kenny, it occurred to me that I could probably use some help. And on the car lot at that time, they'd just taken in trade. I swear to you, this is the truth. They'd taken in trade that we called the money van. And this was a green Ford Econoline van, a green one with the green kind of tinted bubble windows in the back and green shag carpet and a sink, and had this, green bed and bedding in there and these huge big seats. And I swear to you, on the side of the van is painted $100 bills on the side. So we had these Ben Franklins on there. So we got in that van because we needed some room, and we drove that thing to Idaho and back. And it was just, one of those unbelievable experiences. And we're headed over there, and I'd never been out of town in my sobriety. I just had stuck to the car lot, the AA hall, the workshop, the big book guys, back to I just had this deal, and I hadn't been out of town. But I knew that he said, yeah, well, we'll try to catch this meeting in Spokane if we can get over there by noon. There's a great meeting in Spokane. But I don't know if we'll make it or not. But if we do, we'll get over there. And I was thinking in my head, I know what happens when you go to an out-of-town meeting. They'll ask, is there anybody here from out of town? And I'm going to get a chance to share. And yes, I'm from out of town. Kenny from Seattle, sober 6 months. And then they'd, of course, be obliged to call on me. So I'm just thinking, what's going on? We got to get there. We got to get there. And this is before, we had the clocks. Everybody had clocks in their pockets. And so Al had the time, and I kept, Al, what time is it? And then, how long do you think it's going to take us to get to Spokane? How long do you think it's going to? He didn't know what was going on in my mind, but he just keeps looking at me, and then we pull in, we get some gas. And he comes out of this deal, and there must have been like a little cheap little stand on the counter there. But he comes in, and he has this little watch. And it has one of those little push buttons where if you push it and hold it, you'll get seconds, and you push it and hold it again, you'll get the minutes, just the cheapest little thing with a plastic band. And he just throws it at me and says, stop asking me what time it is. And, one of the things that's happened in my life is just, it's amazing if this one thing, this obsession for more, this obsession to destroy ourselves with booze and drugs, that when that obsession was removed, all kinds of wonderful things were possible in my life. Just that little thing. I didn't suffer from this merciless obsession for more. And that was all that was left in the end of my drinking was, more. I was just driven, and everything worthwhile in life went, of course, but minus that, some things have happened in my life, and I've just taken this spiritual way of life into my work, and then into management and business, and I've had some success in that area, and so today I don't wear a watch, but today I have a box actually of some pretty nice watches. I've been given watches in business, and I've been my wife bought me a couple of nice watches, and I've bought, so I have, and I would trade that and your pick of any 2 or 3 of my possessions for that watch that Al gave me today. And somehow I sense that's the way, that's the way it is for Kenny in his life. And someday, when I start winding things up in this life, I just have a sense that those are the things that are going to be important. It's not all of the business successes or the items that I have or the personal possessions that I have, but it's going to be these small acts of kindness and these little memories of these wonderful things that happened in early sobriety. And it's going to be the look in my wife's eyes when we got married. And we've been married 17 years. We've been together for 19 years, and it's just been fantastic. And as I got through the step work, and I started working with other guys, and it was almost, it was immediate. The question all along was, in amends, does making this next amends have anything to do with whether I will drink again or not? And I knew the truth about myself, that I wasn't somebody that was going to be able just to put this on the burner for a while, that I had to just do, and I loved it. It changed my life. And when I met Shannon, there was, I had a daughter who at that time was around 5 years old when we met. She was living with her mom. We got together when she was 6. She moved in with us permanently, and she's been with us ever since. She's 24 years old now. She's been off to college. She went to the Evergreen State College in Washington, which is quite an interesting place. And as near as I can tell, she received a degree in anarchism. So that's that's the type of college it is. It's way beyond liberal arts, but she does have a degree in creative writing and literature. She works with experimental writing. Her boyfriend is a poet, and they've actually been together since they were together as friends in high school. They both went to the same college. They were through together, and he's really a fabulous guy. I've just been able to do some things in being a parent even recently. I asked her, do you think I was too hard on you when you were in high school? It occurred to me, do you think I was too hard on you in high school with your grades? Because I never got an education. And today in business, I deal with people every day in negotiations and in business that have high degrees, PhDs and attorneys, and I have to go into the God is intelligence, that there's nothing that prevents me from sitting down. The things that I need to know will be revealed to me, and I may need to work hard. But I was driven a little bit, with her grades, and I said, do you think I was too hard on you with your grades? And she said, oh yeah. And I told her, I'm sorry for that. That I drove you into. I put that much importance, because the things that are so much more important to me are the content of your character, the searching for meaning in your life. And I've let her know that don't. She's been hung up. What does her dad think? What does her dad think? I've tried my best to set her free of that. Like, I don't want you to live your life based on what I think. Go have your own life. And our son, too, we adopted a boy when he was 15. I was sponsoring a woman in AA, and she was a woman that had came and actually had me at a retreat, and by my collar saying, will you help me? Will you help me? She'd lost her teeth somewhere. She was just having a serious mental breakdown. And my wife was standing next to me, and I'm looking, of course, across the specter of people and thinking, oh, yeah, I'm sure somebody here can help you. She's got me by the collar. And so, my wife said, Kenny, you have to help this woman. Oh, she saw the selfishness. Kenny, you have to help this woman. And we began a path that she started in. She was in a hospital being treated for this psychic break that she'd had, and I started reading the book to her over the phone. Took the same way people have taken me through the steps, and it's such an odd way, this reading the book to my sponsee. It just, someday I think it'd be great if we came up with some other term, because it's misleading. We don't read the book to our sponsee. That's a small part of what we do. It's such a small part. we're sharing our experiences, we're asking questions. And so I started that. We did her third step prayer over the phone, and she came out of that experience, and she just went on, she was like a beam, like just on fire with AA. And I started taking her son to baseball games because I got baseball tickets through my work, and I started going. And they were with us every Thanksgiving and every Christmas and every birthday. They were family to us. And she had HIV at that time, and it turned into full-blown AIDS. And I was with her and her boy when we walked in. We'd go twice every day to the hospital to see her. And we'd set it up in advance. She'd come to us and said, if there's ever anything happens to me, would you guys be willing to take Jake, her thing that meant the most in her entire life? And we said, we'd be honored. And of course, she was healthy as a horse at that time. And but when she passed, I was with her. Her son was with her. We held her hands. It was him that says, I think she's gone. And so I walked in there with this boy who was losing his mother, and I walked out with my son. And he's doing unbelievable things. He's in meditation camps and was spent 10 months in the jungle down in Ecuador just last year, and he's trying to save the rainforest. So now I got a guy that's trying to save the rainforest that prays and meditates most all day. And I've got a daughter who's a creative writer looking to go to school. The next school she wants to go to is a Buddhist school in Colorado, and that teaches writing. So we'll wait to hear if she's going to Naropa here shortly. But and then our future son-in-law, I'm quite sure, is a poet. So what this all means is that I'm the only safety net these kids have. So I think I've done a fabulous job with them, but I've got into this situation where I'm going to have to work for a few more years. So. And I've lost track of time, so you'll have to keep me my stopwatch stopped working here. So it's a beautiful day out there, and I know we're all looking forward to getting out there. So, we've had such a great time with our family. We really worried about this. My daughter was 9, and we had a 15-year-old boy moved in. How's that going to work out? We got everybody into a van after the affairs were all settled with his mother, and I did the eulogy at her funeral, and he came to Shannon and I and said, listen, my mom always wanted to see me dressed up, and I never would do it, and would you guys buy me a suit? And then when we went to see the judge for the adoption, he came out of his room when they were going to court, and he was wearing that suit again. So only 2 times I've ever seen him in a suit. And my wife wasn't a great deal of help with the etiquette, and I was like, hey, he'd be like, hey, how many of these pancakes do you think I can stuff in my mouth at one time? And I'd say, listen, Jake, here at our house, we eat fork and knife, less, and then Shannon would be, oh, hold on, I want to see this, And so we've had such a great time, and I get so wound up, and I'm a little stiff just by nature, I think, and I've got a lot of work to do yet on learning how to calm down, but I'm really kind of still stuck on this time, and I haven't quite figured out why that particular defect is still with me, but the family uses it, and one of the things I love going to these Seattle Mariners baseball games, and it's been very tough for about 12 years straight. They've had losing seasons, but I still love to go. It's meditative. I don't take my cell phone. I usually go with another AA person or one of the guys I sponsor, and we sit and we watch 9 innings, and it's just, you don't miss much. I could give a talk like this, and then you have to stop everyone and say, oh, did you see that? And keep going. But I like to get down there, like the stadium opens 2 hours before. You got batting practice. You see the other team bat, and I follow other players from other teams. And so come on, we got to get down there. Stadium's going to open, and the kids use this against me. And my boy would say, just knowing that I'm already thinking about that, say, hey, Dad, how long do you think it's going to take us to get down to the stadium? And he knows. Oh, yeah, watch this. He'll tell, watch this. Hey, Dad, how long do you think it's going to take us to get down to the stadium? Oh, I don't know. He says, well, I'm a little worried about traffic, And then he'd say, hey, Dad, maybe we ought to make a dry run down there and just time this thing out, So we've just had such a unbelievable time. And there's back to the step work just a little bit, this idea of prayer and meditation. One of my favorite Foxisms is, if you don't have time for prayer and meditation, you will have time for sickness and trouble. I just love that. And the idea too that, we AAs are great meditators. We're fantastic meditators. Our problem is that we have trained ourselves to meditate on the wrong things. When I was out homeless, I would walk up and down the streets. I was screaming at the top of my lungs, yelling, walking up and down the streets at a woman that had left me several years before. And I would meditate on that. Meditation is like contemplative, bringing an idea in and thinking about that and nothing less. And I could think about how she wronged me and how she did this and how she did that and how she does what she deserves and what the guy that's with her deserves, and wait till he finds out about who she really is. And all on and on and on and on, just this meditation, this thought, this stream of thoughts going through my mind constantly. And that through this practice, some of those things could help. I implement, this. Alcoholics Anonymous has the I am. Nobody else could say that. I had to say, my name is Kenny and I am an alcoholic. The I am. Nobody can say this for Mark, right? Nobody can say for Bart, my name is Bart and I am a loving child of God. Doesn't do any, it might be somewhat helpful for a brief period of time if I was to tell him that I can see that in him. But it has to be this internal solution inside of Bart. This I am. When I was homeless really literally only for a few minutes towards the end of my drinking. And but there was a guy where I was homeless many times when I was younger, because literally it was sometimes it was better to just walk the streets at night than it was for me to go home. But but during that time I would go stay with this buddy of mine, Steve. And Steve was he lived in this garage. It was a kind of an extension right next to his parents' house. It was a detached garage, double car. It was just the coolest place in the world. I mean, this thing, he had it fixed up so nice. He had, he had a dog, this German Shepherd, that was just the meanest animal you ever met in your life, just very cool place. Because the dog, any dog was always, if there somebody came to the garage door, the dog was always chewing on somebody, and he'd have to peel the dog off. And he had speakers, that back in those days was good. The speakers were about this, a small set of speakers would be about the size of the podium here. And so he had these gigantic speakers, and he'd just play Pink Floyd and just turn it up, and we'd just lay around in there. And it was just, he had blacklight posters, and girls would come, and, there was always, and now I look back and I think, what the hell was his parents, thinking? But my guess is they had their own party going on inside the house. But it was just such a great place. And so when I was homeless, I'd be walking around, and I'd see these clearly underutilized garages. And I would think to myself, God, if somebody would just let me live in that garage, I'd hang up some blankets in there, and I'd, quarantine a little place off for a little bedroom. I'd have some speakers, I'd get a stereo, I'd get a refrigerator, I'd hang some really cool black lights, and, get a strobe light. And, this place was going to be cool. And I didn't think about that until I was sober a few years. And I was thinking about, wow, just looking now, I'd bought my first home, and I started thinking about that, and it occurred to me that I never saw the house. This thing that was right in front of me in my life. I never saw that God would have me have a family, that I would actually live in a house, not in just the garage. It was that block, and it's become a metaphor in our lives. And we moved from, my wife and I had a chance, we bought a home, and it was being built, and so we got, the whole build your house experience. And then we decided we wanted to be closer to the city. About 6 years ago, we moved into right city proper, and we got a place, and it's over the top. I mean, it's just the house that we had before this one was the nicest home either one of us had ever lived in our entire lives. We moved into this house that we live in now. We've got a huge view of the locks and the boats coming and going, which is a huge tourist attraction. We're in Seattle, and we've got Discovery Park just up the street. It's like living in the city in a park, and we've got a beautiful home and this view that goes all the way from the Olympic Mountains to the Cascade Mountains, 180 degree, just with water. It's unbelievable. And a friend of mine, this guy that I sponsor that's heard this garage story, his parents live just down the street. When I told him, hey, I'm moving into this neighborhood, he said, I know exactly where it's at. My parents live right down the street. And so he was the first one to come by right after we moved in. He came in, and we're still, moving in that day, and he's just looking around, and he just looks at me and he says, nice garage. So, I don't know how much time I have left, but I think I've probably used most all the time that I have. I'll wrap it up with this. That, when I came to AA, I was suffering so much. I just felt like somebody should. I had this idea that if somebody just hit me on the head, just this boom, that some preacher would hit me on the head, demon of alcohol, be gone, and wham, and over I'd go, and I'd flop like a fish, and I'd wake up, and this obsession would be gone. I really was thinking that I could maybe find something like that. And then I heard about these people that went to the guru and got their mantra. This was the laying of hands. That somebody could lay their hands on me and I would get well. And that somebody would whisper this sweet mantra in my ear. And that anytime I was in any trouble or I had any type of obsession, that I could use this mantra. And I thought those are the only kinds of things, that would work. And then years later, just a few years ago, I was thinking about these things, and I thought, when I came into that meeting on June the 8th of 1989, a guy that I still am in touch with today was the first guy that laid hands on me in Alcoholics Anonymous. And he reached his hand out, and he said, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous, even the way that I looked. Found me a chair, sat me down, asked if I wanted some coffee. And then I thought, the mantra that's totally changed what it means to me. This idea that, I'm a devotee of the AA way of life today. What it means is that, and I get that my mother is a devotee of the Ram Dass. Some of you know what that means. And so she explained to me, what being a devotee is all about. It means you do certain things, you practice certain things. This is a way of life for you. And so I become a devotee of the AA way of life. It means when I'm dealing with resentment, I put it on paper. It means when I retire at night, there's a certain practice that I do. Upon awakening, as I pause when I go through the day, that when I'm dealing with fear, there's a prayer that I use that I reach my hand out, look for the face of hopelessness. I bring something to the meeting, all these kinds of things, this AA way of life. And so I thought back and I thought, they laid hands on me in that first meeting, and they gave me my mantra. And the mantra is, my name is Kenny and I am an alcoholic. So thank you very much.